How about this? Did Pac sleep with Faith Evans?
Yes.
Okay. Did Pac sleep with Jada Smith?
With who?
Jada Pinkett.
I wasn't with him during that era of his life, but I'll put it like this: I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, he
He
did.
said that Jada
Smashed.
was
He smashed.
like a
Pound cake.
female him,
He
and
did.
that
Pound cake.
I'm
yeah.
gonna stop you right there. So he did. Next question.
So all right.
Okay.
Next
Yeah,
question.
I
yeah,
said I
yeah. Pretty
wouldn't
much.
doubt it.
Next
Pretty much.
question.
Did with all the lost files coming up, detectives feeling like they want to go on retirement because of this and all that. People say conspiracy theory. It's because of him talking. They said he wanted to be part of a certain elite group of people. Then he felt like the lifestyle that they was doing, they were trying to take his soul, and he wanted his soul back. So people felt like he had to go because he knew a little bit too much. Do you feel that Suge Knight set him up?
Um, that's a really good question. It's a very interesting question. Also, I'm gonna put it to you like this,
Put it to me
and
how it's supposed to
I
be.
listen really careful to this. I make no.
Hello?
Okay, here you go. In 1996, the way I felt and what I thought about that whole thing with Suge Knight and the whole situation concerning Tupac and Suge Knight was completely different because I couldn't understand how anyone would sit in a car with someone that they would put a hit on and trust that they wouldn't get shot when bullets was flying all through their car. I said it in Before I Wake, which plays on Fuse TV, and I said it in Got Your Back. You can find it at www.frank-alexander.com or amazon.com.
So is that a yes or a no?
Now, no, this you got to hear this. The thing about that is that was 1996. In 2001, Rolling Stone magazine came out with the Rampart investigation through LAPD. And when that came out, I read that article. I have that article. The whole Rolling Stone magazine was about this crooked LAPD cop story of how Biggie got killed and how Pac got killed. And then it named one of the bodyguards who was with me that was my relief bodyguard for Tupac, named Kevin Hackey. And I can say this because his name is out there like that. And we did a documentary, and he came out and said that he was an FBI informant, and he was there to infiltrate death row for drug racketeering. Now, all along, when we were working together, I never knew that. No one never knew that. But the Rolling Stone magazine announced it. So Kevin sued him over it because they exposed him. All right?
Oh,
so
wow.
after I read that article, and then I started seeing all these LAPD cops that was from the magazine, they had them in there, pictures of them dressed in red suits. Then I started thinking differently, right? Then I started seeing different things about how a different theory and a different conspiracy could have happened. Who am I going to trust to sit next to me or trust to fire into my car if I would have set it up would be another police officer, someone that is well trained with using a weapon. I have two documentaries that go into that, and it's Tupac Assassination, Conspiracy, Revenge, and Reckoning. And I talk about those theories, and I talk about that. And my whole thought process completely changed from 1996 to 2001 after I read that article. Then I started digging and digging and digging and looking for dirt. When I started kicking rocks and rocks started turning over, my partner and I, we started finding dirt. And then other things started coming up. So my whole theory on Tupac's murder did a 360.
So let me ask this last question.
Absolutely, to answer your question, absolutely. Somebody set him up. Now, the conclusion recently, within the last week or two, the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the FBI released a 349-page document saying that in their findings that Suge Knight and Reggie Wright orchestrated and put a hit on Both of them, Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac Shakur. That was the FBI's findings after they released their findings and decided to close the case on that murder investigation for them too. Now, that's what they wanted to do. The FBI did that. And the only reason why they can't bring anyone to trial is because they had 17 informants, and all of them said no, they wouldn't testify. So if you don't have no one to testify to the facts, you don't have a case, and the DA is not going to take it. So LAPD, being Biggie's jurisdiction of where he was murdered at, and then Las Vegas being Tupac's jurisdiction where he was murdered at, they're cold case files, and it's going to take somebody to have to solve them. Do I believe that the person that pulled the trigger on both of them are dead? I would say Tupac's killer for sure is dead. The other one, I can't say as far as Biggie goes. I believe Tupac's killer is dead, though. But I believe this. It was definitely set up.
No,
both of them. It was set up.
Based on your rock uncovering and flipping over, do you or did you see or were you leading to the fact that Suge had something to do with it?
And Puffy.
Now you say and Puffy. I don't know. Here's the truth. Okay, John 8:32, the truth shall set you free. I don't know absolutely one thing surrounding Biggie's death. I cannot answer not one question surrounding Biggie's death for two reasons. One, I was no longer working with Death Row and the security company. I was long gone. By the time Biggie was killed, I was unemployed, writing my book or whatever I was doing. So I cannot answer anything concerning Biggie, Puffy, because I don't know nothing concerning Puffy. Being P. Diddy now. I believe that someone out of Death Row's camp knows who set up Tupac's hit, is what I believe.
Based on your rock uncovering and where you were leading and things you were seeing, do you believe that Suge had something to do with that?
What I believed in 1996,
yes or no?
What I believe today, I would more or less point my finger to yes than no. And that being because we interviewed witnesses and people that testified on camera in my documentaries, that Suge Knight and Tupac had a vicious fight in New York at the MTV Awards. And Tupac told one of the bodyguards, after he was finished with a video shoot, they were walking him to the airplane, he told this bodyguard, who's a real good friend of mine to this day, he said, I'm a dead man walking. And he said, Pac, why would you say something like that? He said, because I don't want to go to Vegas, and I got a bad feeling about it. And that was September 6th. It was a Friday because they had just finished shooting Toss It Up.
That's when the Moo Records, I think, was starting out.
Who was
He wanted to leave.
Who was the big enticer for him to go to Vegas?
Well, here's the other thing. Everything, you guys are really good because everything that you're asking me, all these questions are in my book.
Why, thank you. We just started radio yesterday.
Tupac had some family matters that was going on in Atlanta, and he really didn't want to go to Vegas. He really wanted to go to Atlanta to deal with the problems that was going on with his first cousin, which was one of the outlaws. And this is in my movie, Tupac Assassination Reckoning. It's in that movie. And it's not even that I'm telling it. His family, Tupac's family, is telling it, telling that whole story. And he did not want to go to Vegas. He was not going to Vegas. And he had his mind changed and persuaded to go.
By who?
By who?
By Suge.
Does that have anything to do with him wanting to leave Death Row and start Amuru Records?
That there, when we were on Gridlock and all of that, they had already called an audit on Death Row. We were working on a set of Gridlock, and Yak Fula's mother was one of Tupac's assistants, and she came down to the set specifically to talk to myself and Kevin Hackey to tell us that there were some things going on, there were some changes going on, and they was no longer going to be working with Death Row, that they were doing an audit on Death Row because Pac wasn't getting all his money, and there were some problems. And
it's crazy. Now, you heard the officer who was being interviewed. He basically let y'all know what was going on, who was an FBI informant that was planted in death row to watch everything that's going on and basically try to stick death row for drug trafficking charges. In the process, they had this plant in there posing as a bodyguard. He uncovered a whole lot of extra stuff: plots, murders, murder attempts, dirty cops, everything, right? That's courtesy of Hip Hop Uncensored. They did that years ago. They was trying to give everybody a heads up because they was revealing everything and nobody was listening. The tabloids, the magazines, TMZ, everybody, even Puffy was trying to keep stressing his innocence like and play dumb like he didn't know nothing. Yeah, man, it was bad. And shout outs to Insomniac Wide Awake. He did his own retake on it, and what you just witnessed to from Tupac's main bodyguard, he was talking about how the Mackey dude was a federal plant that was there. Then they got testimonies from all these people and they never looked into it. I'm trying to understand why they won't look into something when it's coming from the mouth of the CIA plant or federal plant that y'all put in the group. He's telling y'all what's happening. I'm gonna run another clip. Is Insomniac Wide Awake, and they was just putting me on to some things. The things that they was talking about was making some sense too. So I want y'all to take a look at this and really, really see what's going on out here. It's kind of crazy that it's really kind of crazy. It's really crazy that this is going down. So we're going to see what's really going on. And it's wicked out here. Police will definitely do whatever they got to do to make sure that situations don't happen and people get dealt with. Pac was about to leave death row because he ordered it death row, right? And Suge hired the people, right? Hold on. Suge hired the people, right? Suge hired the people. And when Suge hired this officer, Suge hired Reggie Wright to be the full security. And when Reggie Wright hired David Mack, Rafael Perez, a couple other guys, he knew these cops was dirty. He knew these cops was into a whole lot of stuff. And it's kind of crazy that they would even go that far. They would even go that far. I'm just saying. Well, we're going to get into this clip by Insomniac Wide Awake, and we're going to just elaborate on some other stuff. I'm gonna pull this. If
I asked you who killed Tupac, who would you say?
Who pulled the trigger? Orlando Anderson, is what I've been told.
He wasn't a trigger man, was he? Have anybody been arrested?
The sad thing about it, Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? It's sensitive, not at all. Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too.
Suge Knight, in an interview which was released in November of 2020,
If I asked you who killed Tupac, who would you say?
Who pulled the trigger? Orlando Anderson, is what I've been told.
He wasn't a trigger man, was he? Have anybody been arrested?
The sad thing about it, Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? It's sensitive, not at all. Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too.
Suge Knight, in an interview which was released in November of 2020, revealed that Tupac's shooter was not Orlando Anderson, who was a Crip gang member that had long been considered as the main suspect in the unsolved case. Michael Douglas Carlin had carried out the interview, who was the co-author to LAPD detective Russell Paul. Russell Paul was the initial lead detective in the unsolved case of Biggie Smalls. Paul had accused LAPD officers, which he believed were connected to Death Row Records, as being behind the murder of Biggie. Paul had initially accused Suge Knight of being behind the murder of Tupac before his investigation had expanded, and he made claims of the same cops being implicated in both murders. Russell Paul had set up a meeting at the LA County Sheriff's Office on August 19, 2015, to have information which was verified by Suge Knight put forward, where Suge Knight was said to have verified and agreed on that the police were behind both the murders of Tupac and Biggie. Michael Douglas Carlin had the information verified by Suge Knight through Suge's lawyer Thaddeus Culpepper, with the verified information then being passed on to an assistant district attorney who is assisting Russell Paul with investigating the information of police involvement. The information, if accepted into a court of law, was going to be proposed to Suge Knight to come forward with his verification to then be used as a bargaining chip in an early release of his 28-year prison sentence from his 2015 murder case. Russell Paul, while presenting the information verified by Suge Knight of cops being implicated in the murders of Tupac and Biggie, had dropped dead in the LA County Sheriff's Office, bringing an end to the investigation. Suge Knight had carried out a prison interview with Russell Paul's co-author Michael Douglas Carlin, which was released in November of 2020, where he'd went on to publicly speak on the claims which he had verified in 2015 to Russell Paul. He claimed Orlando Anderson was not the shooter of Tupac, removing the Crips' responsibility from the shooting, and named former LAPD cop Rafael Perez as allegedly being involved, claiming that they were trying to kill him too. He went on to claim in the interview that the same circle of people were behind both of the murders of Tupac and Biggie, which ties it into the same cop theory. In this video, we're going to put these claims into context by combining Suge Knight's prison interviews and take a look into the alternate theory of Tupac and Biggie, which ties into the US Justice Department and the penal system and the connections it had into Death Row Records. Death Row Records, being infamously symbolized by the logo of the electric chair, has its origin story out of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, being from several incarcerated inmates. Michael Harry O'Harris was serving a 30-plus year prison sentence, being in the Lompoc Federal Prison in California, after being charged in a murder case where he allegedly ordered the murder of his best friend. Harris was known on the street as a large-scale drug trafficker having connections to the Colombian cartels for a man called Mario Ernesto Villabona. Villabona had been the subject of a DEA investigation, being into his ties into the Iran-Contra crack epidemic of the 1980s. The Iran-Contra affair was a political scandal in the United States which had occurred during the 1980s, which resulted in many inner-city kingpins to become rich, being through intelligence connections, which had played a part in funding Death Row Records. The scandal came about following the Boland Amendment of 1984, which was passed by US Congress. This bill removed funding to a militia in Nicaragua called the Contras, who were fighting against the overthrow of a pro-communist group called the Sandinistas. Ronald Reagan's administration had been funding the Contras in fighting against communism until it was discovered that they were violating several laws, which included war crimes and drug trafficking, causing US Congress to then prohibit the funding. This spawned the Iran-Contra affair, where new means of funding were found, such as selling arms to Iran under an arms embargo, and
At all, never. I never had a conversation with none of those dudes. Never met those dudes. They never worked for me. They knew Reggie right. They didn't know me.
Rightway Security Services has never them to work security at death row parties, unquote. This connection between Snoop Dogg and the Rampart Cops has come into question regarding Snoop Dogg's 1996 murder acquittal after evidence went missing from the LAPD Pacific Division's evidence locker, which Kevin Gaines had dominion over. The book Chaos Merchants by Russell Paul and Michael Douglas Carlin lists Kevin Gaines as a suspect in the theft of this evidence. David Kenner was representing Snoop Dogg during the trial, and his defense, along with the missing evidence, had beat the case for Snoop Dogg. Suge Knight's financial advisors were David Chesnoff and Steve Steiner, who were under the umbrella of the legal team with David Kenner. Kenner then owned a company called Kentron, which managed the financial accounts of death row employees such as Sharifa Knight, who was a manager under Nightlife Management. Reggie Wright Jr. during the call questioned on if Kenner had been paying the division after they had heard that Kenner was supposed to make some comps to Kevin Gaines. Comps are when work is done without payment, with services or goods being offered instead.
I was with Cantron and they wouldn't have given no check. I wonder if Cantron and Kenner was paying. Didn't we hear something about they supposed to do some contracts?
Sharifa Knight further claimed in the call that she only remembers cutting one check for Kevin Gaines from her personal account, which was not used and had been cancelled. The transaction was going to be transferred between Kevin Gaines as a payment from death row manager Norris Anderson under the umbrella of Nightlife Management. Sharifa claimed the check was discarded as Gaines went on to cancel the transaction with Norris Anderson after telling Sharifa that the cops had no longer needed the money. She had also claimed that the payment would have been below $10,000 as this would have been traceable and how it would have been written for $9,000.
Not unless it was that whole other thing.
Did you ever give Norris the money, or he didn't get it?
No, he took the money back. I said, no, they changed their mind. They don't need it, because I got a call and said, never mind. And it wouldn't have been for 10, because, 10 is traceable. And if he pulled anything, he pulled 9 directly to my personal account.
Another possible aspect of this conspiracy, money laundering.
Deposit the large amounts of cash in amounts of less than $10,000.
What she's talking about is money laundering or structuring deposits to avoid filling out one of these Internal Revenue Service forms called a currency transaction report.
This shows a connection between Nightlife Management of Death Row Records and the LAPD Rampart Division. It may also reveal a connection between Kentron by Kenner and the division, but Sharifa denied these accusations brought up by Reggie. Other cops of the Rampart scandal include David Mack and Rafael Perez. Rafael Perez had exposed the scandal in the late 90s, with him during the time also going on to reveal how he and his partner Nino Durden framed gang member Javier Ovando after they had permanently paralyzed him by shooting him, then planted a gun on him to frame him, which included testifying against him for him to receive a 23-year prison sentence. Rafael Perez and David Mack have been connected to Death Row Records by witnesses who claim to have seen them supplying security. Kevin Hackey.
Death Row had the police, dirty cops, part of a Rampart scandal, supplying security, shaking down people in the street, robbing people, doing all types of dirty things out here, and they was under Death Row. Suge Knight runs all of Death Row. So anything that happens in Death Row, Suge Knight has to okay it for it to fly. Everything has to go through Suge Knight. So Suge Knight trying to back up out of this. Why Suge Knight starting to reveal everything now? He's in prison. He look like he's going to die in prison. God forbid, but that's what it's looking like. So after 27 years and doing all that he could, now he's starting to reveal certain things. The guy you see in this picture right now is one of their security dudes who just happened to be a federal or CIA plant that was planted in Death Row, maneuvering as an officer, a security officer, whatever the case may be. This guy in the picture right here definitely was a cop working with the police, infiltrated Death Row, got a lot of information. Now peep what he got.
His interview conducted by Russell Paul, which is outlined in the Labyrinth book, claims Hackey told Paul that the first time he had ever seen David Mack was while David Mack was allegedly providing security at the 1995 NAACP Image Awards. Artist C-Style, who is affiliated with Snoop Dogg during his time at Death Row, claimed in the 2021 documentary Last Man Standing that he had witnessed David Mack and Rafael Perez several times providing security at Death Row parties.
I seen David Mack.
So these officers was security on different occasions. Multiple different occasions, these officers were security. People in the camp is confirming that they seen these officers around. So we're going to find out exactly, excuse me, I went too far back. We're going to find out what's going on. Somebody got to tell something, right? Let's see.
filling out one of these Internal Revenue Service
I'll
forms
take you back a
called
little
a
bit further.
currency transaction
I want y'all
report.
to hear
This
it
shows a
again.
connection between nightlife management of Death Row Records and the LAPD Rampart Division. It may also reveal a connection between Kentron by Kenner and the division, but Sharifa denied these accusations brought up by Reggie. Other cops of the Rampart scandal include David Mack and Rafael Perez. Rafael
lying
Perez
going
had
on.
exposed the scandal in the late 90s, with him during the time also going on to reveal how he and his partner Nino Durden framed gang member Javier Ovando after they had permanently paralyzed him by shooting him, then planted a gun on him to frame him,
Planted a
which
pistol.
included testifying against him for him to receive a 23-year prison sentence.
The dirty cop Rafael Perez and his homeboy set up a dude after they done shot him and paralyzed him, planted a pistol on him, and then the dirty cop ends up testifying against his own boy partner just for a 23-year sentence in prison. These are the people that people elect certain officials to get in and hire certain guys like this to protect and serve. This is happening across the nation.
Rafael Perez and David Mack have been connected to Death Row Records by witnesses who claim to have seen them supplying security. Kevin Hackey's interview conducted by Russell Poole, which is outlined in the Labyrinth book, claims Hackey told Poole that the first time he had ever seen David Mack was while David Mack was allegedly providing security at the 1995 NAACP Image Awards. Artist C-Style, who is affiliated with Snoop Dogg during his time at Death Row, claimed in the 2021 documentary Last Man Standing that he had witnessed David Mack and Rafael Perez several times providing security at Death Row parties.
I've seen David Mack plenty of times.
Who was the other one? Rafael Perez.
Rafael Perez, seen him too.
Joe Cool, who was an artist associated to Death Row Records, claimed too in a documentary that he had seen Rafael Perez both in uniform and out of uniform, along with David Mack, and had seen them interacting with Suge Knight.
Officer Perez, he was friends with Suge.
Didn't Suge say in the interview that he didn't know no guys? Reggie Wright knew them guys. He didn't know them guys. He didn't know them guys. He didn't know them guys.
Book claims Hackey told Poole that the first time he had ever seen David Mack was while David Mack was allegedly providing security at the 1995 NAACP Image Awards.
Said he didn't know
Artist
them guys.
C-Style, who is affiliated with Snoop Dogg during his time at Death
Watch
Row,
our son
claimed
just
in the
admit that
2021 documentary
Suge knew
Last
him.
Man Standing that
Personally,
he had witnessed
he was
David
good
Mack
friends
and
with
Rafael
Rafael
Perez
Perez.
several times providing security at Death Row parties.
I've seen David Mack plenty of times.
Who was the other one? Rafael Perez.
Rafael Perez, seen him too.
Joe Cool, who was an artist associated to Death Row Records, claimed too in a documentary that he had seen Rafael Perez both in uniform and out of uniform, along with David Mack, and had seen them interacting with Suge Knight.
Officer Perez, he was friends with Suge. I've seen him up there several times. I seen him in uniform and out of uniform. And then there was another one, the one that they said killed Biggie, right? He used to be up there too.
The LAPD.
Heard what he said? The one that killed Biggie. The one that killed Biggie, yo.
Witnessed David Mack and Rafael Perez several times providing security at Death Row parties.
I've seen David Mack plenty of times.
Who was the other one? Rafael Perez.
Rafael Perez, seen him too.
Joe Cool, who was an artist associated to Death Row Records, claimed too in a documentary that he had seen Rafael Perez both in uniform and out of uniform, along with David Mack, and had seen them interacting with Suge Knight.
Officer Perez, he was friends with Suge. I've seen him up there several times. I seen him in uniform and out of uniform. And then there was another one, the one that they said killed Biggie, right? He used to be up there too.
The LAPD chief Bernard Parks, who was the chief in the 90s, had also claimed or confirmed that David Mack and Rafael Perez worked security for Death Row Records.
We know that David Mack and Rafael Perez both worked security in Death Row Records.
Author John Potash revealed how LAPD detective Russell Paul had asked his superiors as to why so many officers were working within Death Row Records, to which he had gotten the response of, consider them as covert agents.
Los Angeles police officer found dozens and dozens of his fellow police officers at all levels of Death Row Records. When he went to his superiors to ask what were they doing there, they said you can consider them covert agents.
Suge Knight, in a 2017 prison interview carried out for the Fox show Who Shot Biggie and Tupac, had been questioned on Rampart cops David Mack and Rafael Perez. Suge Knight, in the prison interview, claimed he did not know any of the cops and shifted the focus towards Reggie Wright Jr.
The police officer, David Mack.
Never worked for me at all.
See, two people said that he did. They said if one say you're a duck, all right. Two say you're a duck, you might be a duck, Shug. You lying on this one.
Never. I never had a conversation with none of those dudes. Never met those dudes. They never worked for me. They knew Reggie Wright. They didn't know me.
Rightway Security Services has never been proven to have been connected to the Rampart Division, although Suge Knight claimed that it was Reggie Wright Jr. who knew the cops during the 2017 prison interview. Reggie claims that Suge Knight had said this as Suge associated any type of cops to Reggie Wright Jr. due to what Rightway's Protective Services provided. The only proven connection to the Rampart Division to Death Row Records was the relationship between Kevin Gaines and Sharifa Knight, which was being carried out in secret from it being an affair. This connection
The police and Suge Knight's wife was having an affair behind Suge Knight's back. This same cop you see is the same cop that stole evidence in the Snoop Dogg trial, and that's how Snoop Dogg beat his murder trial. Everybody thinking he was found not guilty because of a jury found him not guilty. Of course, they found him not guilty when the evidence in the murder case was missing. Just like the evidence in the Biggie case was missing. There was a black Impala. There was a weapon, a 9mm, and the ammunition from that same 9mm that they found at the officer David Mack's crib. Allegedly, not allegedly, they saying that's the gun that killed Tupac and that's the whip that drove off that kill. Excuse me, that's the gun that killed Biggie and that's the whip that drove off. But this cop right here, dirty, he was messing with Suge Knight's wife behind Suge Knight's back. What you think would have happened if that man would have found that out? And he's working on the security team.
Provided Kevin Gaines' work through being paid in cash by recruiting his fellow Rampart cops to provide security, being under nightlife management through Sharifa Knight. Suge Knight had found out about the relationship between his wife and a cop in 1996, and while in the back of a car with Sharifa, Suge had threatened Kevin Gaines, and Sharifa then told him that Gaines was a cop to warn Suge Knight not to do anything stupid. This reveals that Suge Knight did not know about Kevin Gaines being a Rampart cop. Jimmy Iovine had also claimed during an interview with Sway that he advised Suge Knight to hire police security to only then find out that they were Rampart cops.
I insisted they get real security, real cops. So next time I go, there's real police.
Jimmy Iovine insisted that Suge gets police to serve as security, and the police that serve as his security is the dirty Rampart police that was involved in one of the biggest police scandals of U.S. history. This man right here told Suge to get police as security, not the dirtiest police, or if not one of the dirtiest groups of police in United States history, bro. And Suge is denying that he don't know these people. Jimmy Iovine told him directly. You hear it?
I found that they were Rampart guys.
Suge Knight would later
Listen to what Jimmy Iovine says.
At all, never. I never had a conversation with none of those dudes. Never met those dudes. They never worked for me. They knew Reggie Wright. They didn't know me.
Rightway Security Services has never been proven to have been connected to the Rampart Division, although Suge Knight claimed that it was Reggie Wright Jr. who knew the cops during the 2017 prison interview. Reggie claims that Suge Knight which would have gone against his appeal and
Excuse me.
landed in
My bad. Speed it up a little.
Action provided Kevin Gaines work through being paid in cash by recruiting his
There
fellow
you go.
Rampart cops to provide security, being under nightlife management through Sharifa Knight. Suge Knight had found out about the relationship between his wife and a cop in 1996, and while in the back of a car with Sharifa, Suge had threatened Kevin Gaines, and Sharifa then told him that Gaines was a cop to warn Suge Knight not to do anything stupid. This reveals that Suge Knight did not know about Kevin Gaines being a Rampart cop. Jimmy Iovine had also claimed during an interview with Sway that he advised Suge Knight to hire police security, to only then find out that they were Rampart cops.
I insisted they get real security, real cops. So next time I go, there's real police. I found that they were Rampart guys.
Suge Knight would later verify information connecting the Rampart division into the unsolved murders of Tupac and Biggie. Tupac was bailed out of prison in October of 1995 with the assistance of David Kenner. David Kenner created an appeal which was approved by a judge, where for a bond of $1.2 million,
Lawyer had a death row chain
Tupac
on.
would be released from prison and signed to Death Row Records for a 3-album deal. Suge Knight got the $1.2 million from Interscope, which was then used for Tupac's freedom. Tupac then had to have David Kenner as his defense lawyer and entertainment lawyer also. Tupac's family warned Tupac that this was a conflict of interest. With Death Row operating out of California, Tupac from October of 95 to August of 96 had broken the 3 strikes law within California, which would have gone against his appeal and landed him back in prison. Some, such as author John Potash and others, claim that cops had brought a possession charge against Tupac, which was the final straw, where Reggie Wright Jr. claims it was from his case with the Hughes brothers. David Kenner had one of the cases moved to Las Vegas to circumvent the California law, with Kenner doing this through a Las Vegas business attorney called George Kalisis. Kalisis was a Las Vegas lawyer who was known for defending police officers involved in corruption cases. George Kalisis also knew Suge Knight's financial advisor David Chesnoff, who was also a criminal defense attorney based in Las Vegas. George Kalisis was the business attorney for Club 662. A Death Row business manager was a man by the name of Steve Cantrock, who introduced Suge Knight to New York Colombo mob associate Robert Amir. Amira had been indicted in a Las Vegas case with members of the New York Colombo crime family, but the case had been dismissed. Robert Amira helped with Suge Knight being introduced to Helen Thomas, who was a Las Vegas businesswoman who owned a Vegas nightclub which was formerly known as Botany's. Botany's previous owner had been convicted for skimming money for the Chicago mob from the Stardust Hotel in Vegas. The club was then purchased by Helen Thomas, who was introduced to Suge Knight through Robert Amira, with the club being rebranded as Club 662, which spells out MOB on a keypad, representing Suge Knight's affiliation to the mob Compton Pyrus. 662, oddly enough, was also the Californian penal code for death row inmates. George Kalisis became the business attorney for Club 662, and with Kenner moving one of Tupac's legal cases to Vegas, Kalisis was now responsible for creating an event where Tupac could serve community service. Kalisis chose the night of September 7th, 1996, where he held a charity fundraiser for a Las Vegas Metro police officer called Patrick Barry. The cop owned an organization called Barry's Boxing, with the fundraiser being held on the night of Mike Tyson vs. Bruce Seldon to create awareness for the charity. David Kenner had the circumstances approved by a judge, which included Tupac having to perform at the benefit gig for the Las Vegas Metro cop in order to serve community service. Tupac now had to travel to Las Vegas to serve the community service, otherwise he would have gone back to prison. Page 91 of the book Chaos Merchants by Russell Paul and Michael Douglas Carlin reads, quote, 23 security personnel are gathered and George Kalisis tells them that they cannot carry weapons. Subsequently, Reggie Wright Jr. gathers together security personnel a few hours before everybody goes to Club 662 to tell them that they cannot carry weapons, unquote. Reggie Wright Jr. claims that this was miscommunication between Khaleesi and him to the security, as Reggie claims he had told the security only to disarm before entering Club 662, as he already had armed officers providing security.
24 bodyguards that night were told not to carry weapons.
This had caused Tupac's bodyguard Frank Alexander to disarm early, being unarmed while guarding Tupac. His other bodyguard, Michael Moore, had refused to disarm and was taken off of Tupac and was told to go to Club 662 instead.
I had two of the toughest guys for him, and Reggie pulled him off of me. It didn't have to happen.
Kevin Hackey had been requested to work by Reggie Wright Jr., but Hackey was not in Vegas that night and also had Frank Alexander's security radio, which meant that Frank Alexander could not communicate with the security detail. Hackey was also Tupac's connection to bulletproof vests, which Hackey claimed he always made sure Tupac wore when he was with him. Suge Knight and Tupac, along with the bodyguards and an entourage of Blood gang members, went to watch the Mike Tyson fight in the MGM Grand at 8 p.m. Following the fight, one of the Bloods pointed out Keefe D's nephew, a Southside Compton Crip by the name of Orlando Anderson. Orlando Anderson and the Southside Compton Crips were associated to Bad Boy Records, whose main representatives were Biggie and Puffy, with Suge Knight and Tupac having animosity with them from years prior, which had continued to escalate after Tupac had joined Death Row. Tupac ran over and attacked Orlando Anderson, followed by Suge Knight and the Bloods. At 11 p.m, Suge Knight and Tupac were traveling to Club 662 so Tupac could perform his community service. They were stopped and pulled over by Las Vegas cops, who claimed that their radio was too loud. After being released and stopped at a red light on Flamingo Road and Colville Lane, a car carried out a drive-by on Tupac and Suge Knight's BMW, firing 13 times, hitting Tupac 4 times, and grazing Suge Knight's head. Bullet casings reveal that it was a Glock which was used in the shooting. Kevin Hackey went on Fox News in 2007, where he spoke on his beliefs about the murder weapon and how it had gone through the hands of the police, the FBI, and the ATF. Hackey claimed to Fox News that he believes the Glock was the same weapon which was confiscated from Tupac's rap group member called Fatal, which Hackey had then given back to Death Row security. Hackey claimed on the 4th of July 1996, while Tupac was performing at the House of Blues, an off-duty Santa Monica police officer who was working security for the venue had searched Fatal and found a Glock. Napoleon, who was another rap group member of Tupac's group The Outlaws, revealed on his podcast in 2021 how Kevin Hackey had been selling guns to the group and were their connection to bulletproof vests. Napoleon further claimed he believed the punch a crack epidemic of the 1980s. Security. He then claimed on Fox News that he believed it was the same Glock which was used to kill Tupac.
A month later in Las Vegas, investigators say it was a 40 Glock handgun that killed Tupac Shakur. Hackey believes the murder weapon was the same gun.
I believe it is.
Compton police claim to have found a Glock in a plant pot within a garden of a girlfriend of a Southside Compton Crip associate called Corey Edwards, with Compton police officer Tim Brennan claiming that it matched casings at the scene, but was then destroyed by the ATF when it was handed over.
This gun shows up. I give it to the ATF agents. They say the gun matched on the murder of Tupac. It was a positive match on the casings.
Orlando Anderson became the main suspect afterwards, being considered as a revenge shooting for the beating which took place 3 hours prior. Suge Knight, in a prison interview released in November of 2020, claimed the shooter was not Orlando Anderson and made claims of Rafael Perez and the Rampart cops, allegedly being implicated in the shooting. Russell Paul's documents, which were declassified on the FBI website, reveal that Kevin Gaines and other officers of the Rampart Division were in Las Vegas on a special assignment for the LAPD on the night that Tupac and Suge Knight were shot at. Author John Potash believes Rampart cops killed Tupac and claimed it was the same division of the LAPD which assisted with the Robert Kennedy assassination in the late 60s.
The cops that assassinated Tupac were mostly from the Ramparts Division. That's one of 18 Los Angeles police divisions. The Ramparts Division was the division found to work with the CIA to assassinate Robert F. Kennedy.
Tupac's brother Mopreme Shakur has revealed in interviews that he feels as if the cops killed Tupac and feels that Orlando Anderson was used as a pawn.
Do you have any ideas as who you think assassinated Park? Any suspicions about anything at all? Because I know a lot of people have their own theories and so forth. But what is Mopreme Shakur's views on who assassinated Park?
Cops.
Orlando Anderson, when questioned on the murder, claimed he felt as if he was being used as a scapegoat.
I mean, I've been thinking, maybe I'm a scapegoat or something. I just want to let everybody know, what I'm saying, I didn't do it.
With Orlando Anderson and the Southside Compton Crips being blamed for the murder, a gang war had broken out in Compton between the Bloods and the Crips, which only started after a suspicious murder. Larry Finch was a cop of the Compton School District Police Department, which was Kevin Hackey's former division. Larry's brother, Bobby Finch, who was a bodyguard, was murdered 4 days after the Tupac shooting, on the same day that Tupac had died from his injuries. Bobby Finch was the neighbor to Corey Edwards, who Compton PD had implicated in finding the gun at the property, which was then destroyed by the ATF. Corey Edwards had warned Bobby Finch that the neighborhood was going to get very dangerous from the events which took place in Vegas. Bobby Finch was killed in a drive-by shooting, being shot 13 times in an unsolved murder, with the killer never being identified, with Reggie Wright Sr. becoming the lead investigator of the homicide. Bobby Finch being murdered on Southside Compton Crips territory erupted a gang war between the Southside Compton Crips and the mob Compton Pyrus, as the Bloods were blamed for the murder. Michael Douglas Carlin claimed that he believes cops were implicated in the death of Bobby Finch, to then stage the gang war between the two sets to fit the narrative.
13 rounds, 12 hit Bobby. Maybe they're protected by cops. Maybe he was shot by a cop. And you have Reggie Wright Sr., who is the homicide investigator investigating this murder, and there's never a killer brought to justice.
The Labyrinth book reveals police informant reports of how Suge Knight allegedly delivered a load of AK-47 assault rifles being to Blood gang members in the Nickerson Gardens housing projects in September of 1996, after the gang war had broken out to be used in it. Kevin Hackey had been arrested after he was found to have a trunk full of AK-47s which he had been selling, which gives credence to Napoleon's claims. Hackey had claimed in the 2002 documentary Biggie and Tupac of how he believes he was set up by the intelligence agencies for revealing he had classified FBI documents which revealed the FBI have Tupac's murder on tape, being in private surveillance footage.
Hackey was incarcerated for having a trunk full of AK-47s. Hackey claims he was betrayed by the FBI. He wasn't given the promotion he was promised, and they then let him languish in jail. He had himself just been released from prison.
The MGM Grand tape of Orlando Anderson getting beaten down was made available to the public and spread throughout the media after David Kenner had entered it into evidence for Suge Knight's probation violation case in October of 1996. Suge Knight had been on probation and was able to avoid jail due to his connection to a prosecutor called Lawrence M. Longo, also known as Larry Longo. The CCTV footage spread throughout the media and blew up the Bloods vs. Crip theory and also the East Coast vs. West Coast theory. Suge Knight during this time turned over control of his accounts of $500 million along with his investments to his financial advisors being David Chesnoff and Steve Steiner, who were serving on his legal team with David Kenner. Over $13 million were churned out in legal fees going to the law offices of Kenner, being shared between the parties. In Suge Knight's 2020 prison interview, he claimed that an accounting firm who Jimmy Iovine had introduced them to had allegedly stole between $30 to $40 million off of Suge Knight while he was incarcerated, claiming that they were giving Kenner $100,000 a month, which Jimmy Iovine was getting a kickback from.
I had caught the accounting firm who Jimmy introduced us to. They stole $30-40 million. They was giving David $100,000 a month, and David said he was giving Jimmy a kickback from the $100,000 a month.
Suge Knight also claimed that he was not supposed to go to prison for the probation violation, which he had been sentenced to 9 years, but feels as if he was set up by those involved in handling his case.
I never should have went to prison the first time I went to prison. They just played with the thing the way they wanted to play with it. So we was paying him for all the work he did as an attorney, and they was giving him $100,000 a month. That played an effect on me getting a violation when I shouldn't have got a violation.
This came after Kenner had created a conflict of interest between Suge Knight and prosecutor Larry Longo, as Kenner, while preparing Tupac's community service in Vegas, also moved Suge Knight into a Malibu beach house owned by Longo and gave Larry's daughter's tape to Suge Knight, promising her a record deal if Suge Knight were to keep staying out of jail from Longo's assistance. This information had come out during Suge Knight's probation violation hearing, which was seen as bribery from the conflict of interest created by David Kenner, which added towards Suge Knight's guilty sentence in his probation violation case. Suge Knight was sentenced to 9 years in prison, and Reggie Wright Jr. began to run the company for Suge Knight, with Reggie Wright Jr. getting advice from David Kenner. Suge Knight, in a 2020 prison interview with Michael Douglas Carlin, claimed he believes there was a conspiracy against him in 1996, which was to gain control over his company.
All the stuff really comes from because they want the ownership of my company. That's how it happened.
It goes all back to 1996.
Right.
Biggie was murdered in March of 1997, being 6 months after Tupac was murdered. His death was seen as revenge for the Tupac murder from the accused Southside Compton Crips ties to Puffy and Biggie. Russell Paul was the first detective placed to investigate Biggie's death, who began to uncover the Rampart Division's connections into Death Row Records. Paul would then link this connection into the death of Biggie Smalls, which ties into the larger theory that the same people were behind both hits, which then used an East Coast vs. West Coast, Bloods vs. Crips smokescreen as a cover to hide behind. Suge
is The same people who killed Pop was the same people who killed Big. Listen closely to what Suge says. Listen closely.
Knight, in the 2020 prison interview carried out by Russell Paul's co-author, claimed that the same circle of people were involved in both crimes, which ties into this theory.
And the other thing is for Biggie's side, that they saw the first one, they saw the second one, because it's the same people, same circle of people.
Suge Knight had also commented on this in his 2017 interview for the Fox show Who Shot Biggie and Tupac.
Sometimes you saw the first case.
Suge said if you solve the first one, you solve the second one. They're going to solve the second one, which is going to show you who killed Tupac, because Biggie was the second murder. So Suge said if you solve one, you solve the other. If you solve the first one, you solve the second one. Sometimes you solve the first case, you might solve the second. He said they all in the same circle. And the people that was responsible for Biggie's murder was David Mack. And David Mack had some people, I don't know who else. David Mack was part of the Rampart cops that was under Reggie Wright, that was a part of Death Row. So Suge is telling all of this right now because Suge really is running out of thread. Suge's running out of thread because even though you telling on these officers, right, and you trying to make it look like they was taking stuff from you, they might have been stealing, but you was still around. And you was the head of Death Row. So if this officer, David Mack, who was on your security staff under Reggie Wright, and he was a Rampart cop, which was dirty, he was on Death Row's payroll. Reggie Wright's security company was under your payroll because your wife was giving bread out to take care of that.
You might have saw the second case, but that never happened, correct?
Yep.
Kevin Gaines was murdered 9 days after Biggie by a fellow cop called Frank Liger. Russell Paul was made aware of the crime and began to investigate it. On the scene of the murder, Paul found the address of Gaines's girlfriend who lived in the Hollywood Hills, and when arriving is when Paul had came to find out that it was Sharifa Knight. When Kevin Gaines' locker was searched, developed photographs of Suge Knight and Tupac were discovered taped to the back of the locker.
When he investigated the cop that was messing with Suge Knight's wife. Suge Knight's wife, the police officer had pictures of Pac and Suge riding. That might have been the officer who tried to kill him. We don't know.
Paul now became aware of the connection between the Rampart Division and Death Row Records through Nightlife Management. Paul soon became aware of a lead which connected David Mack to the murder of Biggie Smalls. David Mack robbed the Bank of America on November 6, 1997, using his girlfriend, who was the assistant manager at the bank, to order in $722,000, which arrived just 10 minutes before the robbery took place. David Mack was seen on the bank's CCTV system carrying out the cash in the bags which he had just been delivered in. David Mack was arrested a month later, and when Russell Paul searched his home, he found a black SS Chevy Impala with chrome wheels, which
the same Impala that they was looking for when Biggs got shot. They said it was a black Impala. They tried to compare it to DJ Quick's Impala. DJ Quick wouldn't involve himself into that. Killer would have got quick fast. They would have got caught quick fast. They tried to compare that Impala to DJ Quick's Impala. The whole time it was the officer's Impala. Dirty. Smell me? Dirty. They found the pistol that killed Big on the cop. They found a pistol that killed Big on the cop.
Same people, same circle of people.
Suge Knight had also commented on this in his 2017 interview for the Fox show Who Shot Biggie and Tupac.
Sometimes if you saw the first case, you might have saw the second case, but that never happened, correct?
Yep.
Kevin Gaines was murdered 9 days after Biggie by a fellow cop called Frank Liger. Russell Paul was made aware of the crime and began to investigate it. On the scene of the murder, Paul found the address of Gaines' girlfriend who lived in the Hollywood Hills, and when arriving is when Paul had came to find out that it was Sharifa Knight. When Kevin Gaines' locker was searched, developed photographs of Suge Knight and Tupac were discovered taped to the back of the locker. Russell Paul now became aware of the connection between...
Here's where it gets crazy. Russell Poole finds out everything. And on top of him finding out everything, he mysteriously, I think he dies in his office. Pay attention to what's going on. Listen closely from here on out.
In the Rampart Division and Death Row Records through Nightlife Management, Paul soon became aware of a lead which connected David Mack to the murder of Biggie Smalls. David Mack robbed the Bank of America on November 6, 1997, using his girlfriend who was the assistant manager at the bank to order in $722,000, which arrived just 10 minutes before the robbery took place. David Mack was seen on the bank's CCTV system carrying out the cash in the bags which had just been delivered. David Mack was arrested a month later, and when Russell Paul searched his home, he found a black SS Chevy Impala with chrome wheels, which matched the description of the shooter's vehicle in the case of Biggie Smalls. Along with this, Gecko armor-piercing bullets which were used in the murder were also discovered at his home, which were buried under the floorboards of his house.
Why would you bury casings under the floorboard in your house? Same bullets that was used to kill Biggie. The same car that was described peeling off and taking off. And Gene Deal said they was in the truck that was computerized that only went a certain amount of speed, certain speed. The car, the Impala, took off. But my question is, officer, why would you have bullets buried under the floorboard in your house?
Not only this, but the same weapon type, being a 9mm which was used in the Biggie murder, had also have been discovered. Police had also found a very strange occurrence in the garage. Russell Paul had found that David Mack had kept several photos of Tupac Shakur, which he had seemed to have kept sectioned off in a certain area of the garage, which seemed to be kept in a memoriam, which was...
The officer that they arrested allegedly killing Big, but now they got proof. He had a shrine of Tupac in his garage. That's sickening. That's crazy. I don't know if he was a fan. I don't know if it was part of the thing or if he was trying to get some get back, or he probably killed both of them. It's looking like he killed both of them. Suge said, if you solve one, you solve the other one. And he looked like they solved the Biggie murder. But why this cop ain't get booked yet?
Was described by the detectives as a shrine.
In the garage, next to where the Impalas parked, he had a shrine to Tupac.
This has been seen as David Mack either being a super fan of Tupac from his believed association to Death Row Records, or a more macabre view of it being a trophy shrine under the LAPD theory. Suge Knight, in the 2018 documentary American Dream, American Nightmare, claimed when he looked Tupac's shooter in the eyes, he looked as if he had gotten himself a trophy.
When I look up, I seen the, a mother with fear in his eyes. He ain't got him a trophy.
Russell.
Y'all heard what Suge said? Suge basically said he knew what the killer looked like. He knew who the killer was. Y'all listening to Suge and what Suge said he seen the fear in his eyes.
Biggie Smalls' murder. Kenneth Boagni was Rafael Perez's cellmate, whose claims were included in the trial as official court documents, and although he refused to take the stand, his claims of what Perez had told him about the Biggie Smalls murder were included as court documents. Rafael Perez had exposed the Rampart scandal after he was arrested for stealing drugs out of the evidence locker in 1998, with detectives believing Perez was going to use the drugs to frame the cop who had killed Kevin Gaines. Rafael Perez made a deal to expose the Rampart scandal for a reduced sentence. Perez implicated up to 70 police officers in corruption in 1999, but never once mentioned Death Row Records or its associates. Perez was convicted to 5 years in prison in 2000, but only served 1 year. Kenneth Boagni was Perez's cellmate for a month and a half, with Boagni claiming Perez, while he was intoxicated on prison liquor, had made statements to him about being involved in the Biggie Smalls murder. Official court documents from Boagni, based on what Perez had allegedly told him, labeled death row lawyers working with ex-cops, including David Mack and Rafael Perez, to set up the hit on not only Biggie Smalls, but also Sean Puffy Combs. Boagni claimed that Perez had told him sometime after Suge Knight was incarcerated in October of 1996, David Mack had allegedly have been given the assignment to take out both Sean Puffy Combs and Biggie Smalls. The court documents claim Perez's cellmate Kenneth Boagni claimed Perez had stated that David Mack allegedly reached out to Amir Muhammad to assist with the hit. He was the godfather of Mack's child and had also went to school with Mack. While David Mack was in prison, Amir Muhammad had appeared on a visiting list using incorrect details. Amir Muhammad's real name was Harry Billups, who Boagni claimed Perez had stated that he had allegedly become a hitman for hire, being for the Nation of Islam. According to court documents, Perez had allegedly told Boagni that they were paid $250,000 up front, with a remaining $750,000 being paid afterwards, after both Biggie and Puffy were murdered. Boagni claimed Perez had allegedly gone on to explain that Kevin Gaines was supposed to be a part of the hit and cut off both cars, while Mack and Amir then shot up both the vehicles to kill Puffy and Biggie, but Puffy's car ran a red light, which foiled the plan as Gaines failed to intercept the car.
A lot of people don't know that Gaines was seriously involved in this. He was supposed to cut both vehicles off and the other guy come around and shoot him.
This was corroborated by Gene Deal as he told the driver to run the red light, and also identified Amir Muhammad as wearing a Nation of Islam uniform at the scene of the shooting in the 2002 documentary Biggie and Tupac.
That's him right there.
That's him.
Yeah.
That's him.
That's the guy that came up to me.
The shooter was described as a light-skinned male wearing a suit and bow tie similar to a Nation of Islam uniform. Boagni claimed Perez had mentioned that the additional $750,000 was not given over as the full contract was not complete, which led to David Mack setting up the bank robbery to steal $722,000, claiming he used it to pay Amir Muhammad.
He was supposed to pay a certain amount of money, but they was also supposed to kill Sean Puffy Combs, and they didn't get it done.
The civil trial was dismissed from a lack of evidence against the cops. The theory claims Biggie was taken out to keep up the narrative of an East Coast vs West Coast war, which was being pushed in the media, which Tupac had outlined in one of his last interviews with MTV.
When it all go down, don't look at me and Biggie and be like, why is there a big East Coast West Coast war when you're shooting this to 300 homes, 300 countries, telling them about an East Coast West Coast war that they would never know exists.
Pushers of this theory claim Biggie's life was taken to put attention on the East Coast West Coast motive and away from allegedly what really happened.
The exact same tactics were used to kill Biggie Smalls. U.S. intelligence would call collateral damage.
Biggie was killed for no other reason than to advance this theory that the conspirators that had tried to take out Suge Knight were putting forward.
Russell Paul in 2015 had been working with his co-author Michael Douglas Carlin to get information sent to Suge Knight to be verified. Paul had been investigating Suge Knight's 2014 nightclub shooting, where Suge Knight was shot 6 times, with Paul discovering that Suge Knight was set up by an off-duty cop who were providing security for the club, as the CCTV footage showed the cop letting the shooters in to shoot Suge, then driving them off afterwards. Russell Paul also had further information regarding the cop's connection to the Biggie and Tupac cases, which was planned to reopen that connection to the case, which had been closed in 2005. Michael Douglas Carlin had information sent to Suge Knight regarding the subject through Suge Knight's lawyer Thaddeus Culpepper, where Suge Knight then verified the information. Paul
Suge Knight told, ratted, the big bad gangster confirmed to his lawyer, which means he told. Big Suge, you told and you told. You only telling because you know you ain't getting out of jail no more. You about to go out. Passing out in court. Now you want to tell? You should have did that when you felt it in your heart. Once you realized that Pac was leaving y'all and there was an audit, you conspired with them people. But now everything hit the fan, you telling. Part of the game is that.
Had gotten an assistant district attorney on board with investigating the information which was going to be provided to a court of law, with Suge Knight then going to be offered the chance to cooperate based on the information he verified to work as reducing his 28-year prison sentence from 2015.
Ratting to reduce a sentence. Let this be a lesson to everybody that want to be in a gang. Don't be in them gangs because the result in the gangs is one of the guys is telling on everybody else. That it just so happens he was the head of Death Row Records and he told on everything after doing people dirty and doing all that sucker-ish and doing all that running down on stuff and all that shit karma that came back. Now you want to rat, tuck your tail, eat the cheese, you big rat, oversized rat. You, Suge Knight. I call you that because you painted this whole facade. Death Row Records was a monster, right? And you was bullying people. Now you can't get out of jail, so you're going to try and reduce a sentence by cooperating. Don't join no gangs, y'all. And if you're in a gang and you want to live your life and you start to see things, get out of it. Get out the gangs. The gangs ain't protected, y'all. Look at what's happening in these gangs. They're giving up information. I'm just keeping it
Paul
above.
could get the case re-established in court, Russell Paul had a meeting set up at the LA County Sheriff's Office on August 19, 2015, through Lieutenant Kerry Carter, with him going to the County Sheriff's Office as the LAPD refused to cooperate with the investigation. Russell Paul had attended the meeting to put forth the information verified by Suge Knight, which attached former cops to the murders of Tupac and Biggie.
But I thought Suge Knight didn't know these two police officers. Go back to the interview, Suge was saying he didn't know these officers. What's up with Suge? Get it together, man.
Russell Paul dropped dead within the LA County Sheriff's Office while presenting the information to the police. Official Freedom of Information requests have been filed in 2017, which were responded to and signed by LA sheriffs, who claimed that the information regarding Russell's death cannot be released by them, as the Monterey Park Police Department is handling the investigation, who would need to be contacted directly. In this video, we took a look into Suge Knight's claims from a prison interview released in 2020, where he attached the unsolved crimes of Tupac and Biggie to the LAPD Rampart scandal. Suge Knight claimed Orlando Anderson was not the shooter of Tupac, and named Rafael Perez as allegedly being involved according to his knowledge. Michael Douglas Carlin states during the interview that Russell Paul had gotten it right before he died, which Suge Knight goes on to agree with.
Russell got it right before he died.
Yeah, he's a good guy. They know who's going on behind all that stuff, you know?
Let me know what your thoughts are on all this in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, smash the thumbs.
Shout outs to Insomniac Worldwide, Insomniac Wide. Pardon self, I got the name wrong. But if I got it wrong, it's no intentional malice or anything. But it basically shows you that Suge gave up everything. How Suge all of a sudden knows all these things. He's locked up and he's trying to get out of prison. And all of a sudden you know all these things that transpired. You said you didn't know the officers. You didn't know nothing about these officers. They was Reggie's guys. You didn't do no business with them, yada, 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 right? So how the hell do you know for sure that those two officers was the shooters? You know that Rafael Perez, a guy that you didn't know nothing about, you didn't do no business with him, you didn't know nothing. But you know for sure that Rafael Perez is the one who shot Tupac and he tried to kill you too. How? The only way you can know is if you know more than what you're telling people and it's deeper than what you're telling people. I still think Suge had something to do with Tupac's murder, and he made it look like it was something other than what it was. And he told them police to make that happen. Then you turn around and you give the police information and confirmation and verification that Rafael Perez was the one who killed Tupac. And you said if they solve the first one, they'll solve the second one. You helped them solve the first one, Suge, and they was all under your umbrella. So at the end of the day, you know more than what you talking about. You're trying to give them just enough to where they convict these police and your name don't get brought up in it. But what happens with this is if they get jammed up, it's going all the way back to you too. Jimmy Iovine knew what to do. He got you in jail on your violation through the lawyer and made the lawyer not work for you to get out. That's why you felt like you shouldn't even went in for a violation. They was stealing from you. You was tight. You stealing from somebody. Pop caught on. He ordered that. He's walking away from that. Same thing that happened with Big. Big was leaving. Bad boy. All of a sudden he dies. Wickedness. Rest in peace to the legends, Tupac Shakur, Christopher Wallace. Man. And I hope everybody get what they deserve that got it coming to them, because there's no statute of limitations on murder. Prayers for their families, prayer for their loved ones. Rest in peace, Afeni. Prayers for Miss Wallace. Y'all know what it is. It's no games, man. They ain't playing live.